Well, the Indonesian Foreign Minister, Marty Natalegawa, has raised concerns about specific elements of Tony Abbott's border protection policy. We're joined now in Jakarta by our Indonesian correspondent, George Roberts. George, where did Dr Natalegawa make these comments and how serious were they? And more importantly, I suppose, how did they get out?
Well, this came up in an appearance before Commission 1, which is the Indonesian Parliament's Commission on Foreign Affairs, among other things. Now, a fairly routine appearance by the Foreign Minister, but local journalists were there to cover the event and what he had to say, and then he made these surprisingly strong comments. Bear in mind that Dr Natalegawa is normally very measured and very diplomatic in what he says particularly in public, about foreign policy. Through the election campaign, he was very careful not to comment on things such as the PNG deal until it came a point where he had to address it before the media, but for a long time he was giving no comment on that. And the government here hasn't been drawn in until now into Tony Abbott's plan announced during the election campaign. They've been very careful not to be drawn. So to come out and give a categorical rejection to some of the elements of the plan or proposal as it was back then is quite significant indeed.
Well, George, what did he actually say? Which elements of the plan did he reject?
Well, he said they clearly reject any attempt by Australia to buy boats from Indonesian fishermen in order to prevent them from going from Indonesia to Australia. On the other topics, he was a bit more broad, but he used similar language that he's used in the past and said that Indonesia would indeed reject anything that wasn't in line with the spirit of partnership and wasn't in line with Indonesia's sovereignty and nationalism. So he said that they would reject those things, and that's the kind of language he's used on the second point in the past in terms of turning back the boats. Now, he didn't address turning back the boats, but he did address, imply that Indonesia would also reject the other measures such as paying Indonesians for information. He said that Indonesia wouldn't accept Australia coming into Indonesia effectively and doing early deterrent or early detection measures here. That seemed to be a violation of Indonesia's sovereignty. So it's still quite strong language. The other thing that he said that was very strong was he even said that there was one problem in the coalition's policy, and that was its policy on people smuggling. So he particularly said that the policy itself is a problem, and he said that Indonesia needs to manage that well. He said over the coming days, as they communicate with Tony Abbott, then they will hopefully come to an understanding of what the policy is exactly. He also mentioned that perhaps there could be a difference between what was said in order to win the campaign and what will actually be the reality once Tony Abbott and his government are sworn into power.
Now, George, did you actually see these comments or hear them? I mean, have you had them translated? Is that how you've got such detail? Because from Sydney we actually rang Dr Natalegawa's office and they were hosing it down somewhat, playing down the importance of what he said.
We did as well contact Dr Natalegawa and his spokesman. They didn't respond, but we have heard a translation, or we have, heard the comments and had a translation of the comments given to us, and it's also been confirmed that the spirit of what was in the local papers here was accurate in terms of what he had said. But we have had a translation of the comments, almost exactly, so we do know the details of what he said.
Now, the local papers were reporting a degree of ridicule about the buyback the fishing boats policy, and including sort of huge figures on the actual cost of doing that if you really wanted to buy large numbers of Indonesian fishing vessels.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, look, here in private, officials, since the announcement in the election campaign, have laughed when we've asked them what they think about it. They've refused to go on the record, but they have laughed off the policy and scoffed at it and said, well, how would that work? When you think about Indonesia, 17,000 islands, 6,000 of them inhabited, a fishing fleet of about 700,000 boats. People smuggling sources tell me that they pay about $25,000 for a a junked boat that's on the scrap heap, then they put an engine in it, patch it up again and send it on its way. So in order to buy back all the dodgy fishing boats, of course it would run into the billions of dollars you would expect. But you know, the government here has rejected the proposal anyway, saying that they reject it anyway. So it's certainly not getting any traction or any cooperation from the Indonesian government.
All right, George, we'll leave you there. Much to talk about, no doubt, when Tony Abbott finally meets the Indonesian president. Thanks for being there.